So now I will begin the discussion. Okay. Despite the pivotal roles textiles and clothing have played in visual culture, trade, and religious practices throughout history, they have been conspicuously marginalized in the field of art history. Only in recent years have art historians begun to produce significant monographs on East Asian textiles. In this light, today's presentations emerge as groundbreaking research efforts addressing a notable gap in Korean art history. Both papers, through interdisciplinary approaches, present a wealth of profound analysis underpinned by years of meticulous research. While studies from the fields of 복식사 or clothing history have shed light on the technological and stylistic development of textiles and clothing in Korean academia, I believe that art historical approaches can further deepen our understanding of the roles clothing has played in society. Such approaches illuminate their material agency in social, political, and religious practices, their iconographic and semiotic meanings, and their relationship with gender, as exemplified in the presentations by Dr. Sooa in McCormick and Dr. Hyesung Park today. By Hyesung Park's scholarly venture delves into Dr. Hyesung Park's scholarly venture delves into the continuous changes in embroidery's perception and stature in modern Korea, a transformation modulated by the modern education system and exhibition practice introduced from abroad. The paper's incisive exploration of the process of gendering embroidery as female craft work in modern times and the subsequent implications across very variegated temporal landscapes spanning industries, academia, and the arts is enlightening. Notably, many female figures featured in Dr. Park's study are strikingly absent from the Biographical Dictionary of Korean Artists, a comprehensive dictionary of artists born between 1859 and 1977. Despite the prominent contributions of female embroiderers to major exhibitions in art education, their glaring omission from this dictionary compiled by 김달진 미술연구소, which received national funding from the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism in Korea, highlights the extent to which both embroidery and its practitioners have been marginalized, failing to gain recognition as legitimate arts and artists. In this context, Dr. Park's scholarly endeavor is indeed groundbreaking and valuable, not merely for resurrecting overlooked female artists, but for establishing a new subfield, the history of embroidery within Korean art history. Considering that many audiences at today's conference might be unfamiliar with the history of Korean embroidery, I have a few questions that, when answered, might help them better contextualize your paper within the broader landscape of related practices and history. While Dr. Park's paper focuses on modern era embroidery and its gendering process, could you perhaps shed more light on the male embroiderers, including Gokong from the Joseon dynasty, an era prior to the strictly gendered classification of embroidery? Second, your paper touched upon the exports of Joshibi embroidery to the US and Europe after the Meiji Restoration, as well as South Korea's export-oriented production of traditional Eastern embroidery or 동명자수 in the aftermath of the war. If examples of such exported embroideries still exist in the Boston area, where the venue of our current conference, could you please share your expertise with us? Lastly, considering that the majority of embroideries from the early modern era, along with associated archival materials, have perished, it must have been a significant challenge to excavate and reconstruct the history of modern embroidery. I'm eager to learn about the resources and methodologies you employed to rediscover forgotten artists and their works. Additionally, any sage advice for insights for budding researchers in this niche would be invaluable. And Dr. Sooa McCormick's paper deftly illuminates how environmental upheavals, rather than the inherent aesthetics of the Joseon people, impacted the material culture of the late Joseon era. Her paper convincingly reveals the intricate links between the severe famines of the 17th century and the instatement of the sumptuary laws in the subsequent era, which in turn impacted Joseon women's clothing and fashion. As a result, her paper offers an insightful exploration of the complex nexus among political power, environmental crisis, economic forces, and gender dynamics woven through the history of Korean textile art and fashion. Dr. McCormick insightfully observed that the ruling class of the Joseon dynasty believed women's fashion had the potential to either uplift or deteriorate social ethics. As a result, they sought to influence the ethics and politics of the country through sumptuary laws governing women's attire. This approach suggests that the Joseon ruling class both recognized and perhaps even feared the material agency of women's clothing to profoundly impact society. I would appreciate if Dr. McCormick could further elaborate on the rationale behind the male ruling class's belief in or trepidation about the transformative power of female attire. What motivated their attempt to reshape societal value by regulating women's clothing? Why do they believe in their power, the material power of clothing? Did these regulations achieve the outcome they intended? Furthermore, I'm curious to know if there were comparable regulations for men's attire, and if so, whether such regulations on male clothing had a different purpose. Okay, the next question is, Dr. McCormick questions prior scholarship that posited the fitted jacket and voluminous flared skirts, or 상박 하후 style, which gained prominence in late Joseon as active expression of women's desire to liberate their sexual desire. She questions this previous assumption. I also find this interpretation somewhat questionable. Such interpretation may hold some credence, however, when viewed within the cultural context of the patriarchal Joseon dynasty, such attire might also reflect male fantasies and desire imposed upon the female body. Are there scholarly endeavors addressing this dualistic interpretation of this style of clothing? Okay. Lastly, as someone deeply passionate about seeing the study of clothing and textile emerge as a prominent subfield of art history, I would like to ask you to explain to the audience about the current landscape of this field. Are there distinct approaches and methodologies in the field of art history versus clothing history when examining Joseon women's clothing? How might you advise art historians to delve deeper into the study of Joseon clothing and textile, differentiating their research from that of clothing historians? It would be invaluable for the audience to understand the unique contributions recent art historical studies have made to the topic of Joseon clothing and to recognize potential gaps that textile and clothing historians may have overlooked. I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. McCormick and Dr. Park for sharing their insightful papers with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Youn-mi, for wonderful comments on these two papers. Dr. Park or Dr. McCormick, would you like to respond to Youn-mi's comments?
Thank you so much for insightful question. I prepared some answer to your questions. The first question that, to summarize your first question, that what motivates ruling class attempt to reshape the societal value by regulating women's clothing? I think motivation in 18th century Korean rulership, particularly under the King Yeongjo's reigns, was to make Chosun to be really flourish as a center of Confucian civilization, and we often call Junghwa or Sojunghwa. But also at the same time, there is a great anxiety to realize that political vision, because as we mentioned or discussed in our current scholarship, that the economy was not great. Environmental climate, unpredictable climate patterns continue on throughout the 18th century. But then the anxiety that we really related to ancient, political, theory, that if the climate is not good, that is all because of rulers' moral decay, moral corruption. And one of the very, sign of moral corruption is people's ethical behavior, but that unethical behavior always related to fashion. And in Korean or in Pogyo is a term that refer to attire abnormality or transgression. That Pogyo concept is deeply rooted in Chinese philosophy. When we read, cosmic patterns, 5 elements of cosmic. If something is off in 5 patterns, and it's all that related to the cosmic behavior and the people's behavior all correlated. So I think one of the reasons that they are very keen about the people's fashion is that political vision. And I think why women's clothing became the very focused topic of their regulation, because I think it's related to this interpretation of Neo-Confucian principles by leading scholar Song Xie and his followers in the mid and the 17th century. Their interpretation of their very, discriminatory, attitude of othering women or objectifying women, I think added to that discussion of, this Pogyo or that, so we have to control women rather than blaming everything to the men. I think it's easier for male leading politician to blame things to women. So I think that's something to do with the time. And then the second sub-question from her, previous question that then is there any regulation that apply to men's clothing? Yes, I think there is a certain degree. The men's clothing was absolutely regulated, especially when it comes to the patterns, the silk. And there, earlier on, there are a lot of, men's clothing woven with gold thread and then number of flowery patterns, but all limited now to the cloud patterns. But I think it's also interesting to observe in the men's fashion that men's overcoats that became so diverse, while women's overcoat is limited to 장옷 or 장의. But men's overcoat, became 도포, 두루마기, 소창이, 대창이, 중치마. Their design is more or less similar, but there are certain subtle, design elements are different. So I think that to kind of compensate, they cannot dress up themselves with luxurious material. I think their focus became very onto design. So that's my observation. And then the second question about the Sangbak Hau, that became very prominent in the late Joseon period. Yes, I absolutely agree with this distinctive fashion style, exaggerating women's body, is definitely related to male fantasy. And also the male fantasy is not only objectify women's body or their sexuality, but also I think that whole idea that what is the role of women in the late Joseon period. Women by that time, I think, became really solely perceived as a creature to produce many children as possible. And I think is when you look at this early of 20th century photography of women, especially working women with showing the breast, shown, it's that definitely reflect that idea. It's not necessarily they're showing off their sexuality, but also that's the role that was women taught to be performed, during that time. So I think it's combination of various, elements that contributed to that fashion. And also that absolutely necessary to examine this fashion, not through, very holistic manner, that we need to definitely examine the literature and then written about women's fashion and the woman, literature by women. I think that will bring an interesting, insightful analysis to this, fashion trend. And the last question that you asked, what could be my advice to this field? I don't think I'm qualified to answer any advice on, but when I was preparing an exhibition that opened next spring at the Cleveland Museum of Art, I felt fashion or textile field is very much beautiful island that has a lot of resources for us to explore and then take an adventure. An island that, however, we feel that's the island far away because it involves a lot of technological issues that we are not familiar, but I think they are ready to be explored by many art historians, bringing an interdisciplinary perspective, those primary sources. And I really recognize a lot of textile art historians in Korea. They did excellent excavation, and also they wrote an excellent, thorough conservation report, and they made all the measuring. That's excellent. But they are ready. Those materials are ready to be interpreted more, and then those materials are ready to be included in a broader art historical discourses. And I noticed that some of the very good examples that happening these days, and the recent publication by Kim Min-ji and then Byung-kyung-hee, two scholars that wrote Dress History of Korean History. The subtitle is Critical Perspective on Primary Sources. I think there is now awareness that these materials are ready to be, included of more broader topic and explored by historians and other areas. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Park Sung-seng.
Thank you for your insightful question. And I would like to answer the third question. What resources and methodology were used to rediscover forgotten artists and their works. And unlike Dr. McCormick, there are a few resources about the modern embroidery in Korea. Actually speaking, I am preparing the show in May next year, but there are no artists, just one artist lived today. In 2023, there was an oral interview conducted by Kim Chul-ho, Dr. Kim Chul-ho. At that time, about 20 artists lived, but all are passed away. It's very sorry, but so sorry that immediately after the interview, the exhibition was made, we can meet a lot of works and the materials. I'm so sorry. So all I had to do was doing legwork. I have to search through the obituaries, the old newspapers and articles and magazines, such as Modern Magazine, for woman, 신여성, 신가정, 여원. There are a lot of articles, but the photo was black. And so I have to find their disciples, bereaved families, but the phone number or address was different. So I think that I can be on policeman to look for the information, but it was difficult, but was very great work for me. I'm still looking for the work and materials. And the second one is about the male artisan. Anju-soo. The Anju-soo was originated on a scholar who had exile in Shandong, China, and he saw a lot of male embroidery artisan in China. And when he returned to Korea, he started at Anju, the embroidery. So I show you a Buddhist embroidery, which is collected by a temple, Jijang-am, in Changshindong. He embroidered the Buddhist embroidery, and his son make another big embroidery, almost 5 meter tall, three Buddhist triad? Yeah. So I can guess their technologies delivered to their sons, and they do the embroidery work ordered by not only the secular, by the sacred temple or something. And their they became famous. So in the early 20th century, the royal court of Korean Empire ordered them for their decoration and giving a present for the foreign VIPs. Such, especially the folding screens with great beauty of embroidery was presented to the foreign VIPs. So some of the works are collected by the third question is Smithsonian Institute's National Museum of Natural History. It is interesting, not in the museum or art museum, but in the Natural History Museum. And another one is in Chicago Natural History Museum, because they didn't regard it as a kind of artwork, just a folk craft. So the Go-jong presented a lot of precious work to the foreigners, and Park Chung-hee, the president, gave a gift as a present, the folding screen, to Ministry of Defense in the 1960s. So it's very beautiful white peacock embroidery folding screen. Yeah. Yes, okay.
Thank you so much. Great. Thank you very much for further information. We don't have a lot of time, but I think we can get one or two questions from audience. Any questions? All right. Jian Kim. Wait for the microphone.
First of all, thank you so much for wonderful presentations. I really learned a lot. I have a question for Hyesung Park. So you talked a little bit about these male embroiders, and then do you see any difference in terms of aesthetic styles between male embroidery and the women's embroidery?
The Anju's character is that they make the bigger one, not props like pillows, covers, or the 주머니, bags for spoons. They made a bigger one, like the folding screens, and then uses very colorful and good quality gold thread. They twisted it 60 times, so it's so thick and very three-dimensional. So for the Anju is a little different. It's very colorful and very three-dimensional. And it's not so delicate or exquisite, but so the whole appearance is a little different. So you can compare one with the woman's work at my show. Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I was very intrigued by this Anju practitioners or experts. You know, why Anju in Pyongan province, right? There are so many other places that could produce beautiful pieces with male labor, but why Anju?
Because the Anju is located northern to Pyongyang, and in Sookmyung University's collection, you saw the embroidery of flowers and birds. There is a signature. Actually, there is very rare case for the embroidery artisan have a signature on the work, because only the painter or the designer of the draft can have a signature, but they have. But the Anju, near the Anju area, there's some, how can I say, some good quality material are produced, and the transportation is very good. Okay, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's something I suspected. Near Anju is Seongcheon, where beautiful silk
I think so.
was produced
That's right.
traditionally, and I guess in early 20th century as well. And also it's on the transportation route to China, so that might also have to do with
Near
with the
to
place.
China as well as near to Pyongyang and Seoul. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Professor McCormick, do you have a question? I don't see any. I don't see.
This is not quite formulated yet, but it was along the lines of thinking about the needle and needlework and the way in which it's been discussed in terms of as a substitute or an alternative or a counterpart of the brush, and the ways in which we might think about theorizing the line in art history, and the way in which Tim Ingold and others have done this, thinking about one line being the thread. And so what happens when the line is not drawn, but is instead a thread, and how that changes our understanding of the aesthetics of the object. And what's interesting with the Korean materials is then maybe not just the line that's drawn with charcoal, but how does the thread and the aesthetic of the line of the thread relate to the gestural work of ink work, for example, the calligraphic line. And so it seems like the Korean embroidery materials bring in a whole other kind of frame of reference, thinking about what do you regard the opposition to kind of colorful painted threads, threaded paintings, sewn paintings as. So it's so sort of the traditions of Korean art then can provide a different kind of a framework. Any thoughts on it's a bit convoluted on the line of the thread and the kind of way in which you might bring that into art historical discourse.
So the question
Is it too complicated?
actually, I cannot fully understand your question, but I spent 4 months to learn how to do the Korean traditional embroidery, but it was so difficult. And I found out that I am good at studying better than embroidering. And it takes, I need to fine hands to make embroidery. Wet, sweat, or the lotion cannot be applied because the hands that cook or wash dishes or wash clothes can stain the exquisite materials, the thread and fabric. So I think thought about the same thing because when Ewha, we have a kind of one stroke, but when we make a line with embroidery, I have 3 hours to make one line. So it can coexist between a kind of sumukwa's abstractions, the understanding of the universe, and the delicate work of embroidery. So many things to study about the kind of materials and gestures and the philosophy. I think so.
That's a fantastic answer. And it's also reminding me of your comments on Sunju Kim's comments and Youn-mi Kim's comments about these visceral memories that were prompted by the talks on clothing and embroidery. And I'm just wondering then also how to bring in the kinetics, which you've already sort of begun to do by discussing the thinking of the hand as it's embroidering. But so often weavers think of themselves as time travelers because they are recreating the posture of past weavers and ancestors who did the same sort of work in those materials. And your comments, turning to your mother, or turning to these memories, made me think of that as well. So I wonder if there's also something about embroidery and the bodily engagement that makes it unique and a kind of wealth of a rich area for then exploring how that differs from other art forms.
So it's also a difficult question, I think so, because there is a collection in MMCA which was made by the contemporary artist, but the work is embroidery. But the artist said that my work is not about the embroidery. My work is about the communication. But they think they are artists, but the embroidery makers think they are not contemporary artists. They are still exist in between the craft and the art. So the contemporary embroidery works is labeled as a kind of painting in MMCA, but the old one is categorized as a craft. So there are still unsolved problems, including the language. So
can I just add one thing? Like listening to your conversations, it came to my mind that as when we compare like embroidery and painting, it's almost like that versus line rather than thread and painted line. I mean, before I heard what Dr. Park just explained, I didn't realize that it really requires like endless of like embroidering to make just one line.
Yeah.
So it's more like a dots, like a connected dots rather than a line, which is very interesting. Thank you so much.
Well, we're a little bit over time, so maybe people can engage during the break. We also have one or two sort of online audience questions, but I don't think we have time to engage that, unfortunately. So I'd like to wrap up the session by thanking our presenters and discussant and audience. And we'll resume at 1 p.m., right? So I'll see you back at 1 p.m. Thank you very much.